American officials say the suspect in the failed Christmas terror attack took his orders from al-Qaeda in Yemen. An al-Qaeda group in Yemen has claimed responsibility for the attack. And as Barbara Starr reports, it may have been retaliation for secret U.S. airstrikes that have been going on in that country for months.
This is the front line in the new U.S.-funded secret war against al-Qaeda terrorists and training camps here in Yemen. Al-Qaeda now claiming the attack against Northwest Airlines Flight 253 was in direct retaliation. CNN has confirmed U.S. involvement is deepening in Yemen. In recent weeks, several airstrikes, an al-Qaeda operative eulogizes fellow fighters. A Yemeni official tells CNN shortly after this, the man is killed in yet another raid. General David Petraeus sounded warnings months ago.
That's where al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula has established its headquarters. This is a concern.
In recent months, both General Petraeus and John Brennan, President Obama's top counterterrorism advisor, personally warned Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh that al-Qaeda was targeting his inner circle. A senior U.S. official confirms to CNN that intelligence agencies and military special operations teams are helping Yemen, providing intelligence, training, and weapons. U.S. officials say they gave Yemen intelligence on al-Qaeda targets, but won't say if American warplanes or armed drones conducted the recent strikes. Senator Joe Lieberman offered one of the few public hints.
We have a growing presence there, and we have to, of special operations, Green Berets, intelligence. If we don't act preemptively, Yemen will be tomorrow's war. That's the danger we face.
That's one reason the U.S. is so worried about the claims by the Northwest Airlines suspect. He says he traveled to Yemen and was given bomb-making materials there by al-Qaeda. Look at the map and you see the immediate potential for disaster. Al-Qaeda operatives in Yemen are within striking distance of Saudi oil facilities. Hundreds of vulnerable cargo ships pass the coastline each year. One reason al-Qaeda has established Yemen as its safe haven, the government there is already battling tribal rebels in both the north and the south.
There is a very real sense that the central government is losing control over most of the country.
A senior U.S. official tells CNN that Yemeni President Saleh has grown more accepting in recent weeks of U.S. assistance, that he understands now the situation in his own country fighting al-Qaeda has grown dire. John?
Star reporting tonight. Barbara, thank you. Joining me now is Angel Rabasa, Senior Policy Analyst with the RAND Corporation, and Steve Emerson, the Executive Director of the Investigative Project on Terrorism, to talk more about this. Steve, let's start with you. Richard Clark, the former White House NSC counterterrorism official, the one who sounded the alarm bells prior to 9/11, says that Yemen, in many ways, is in danger of becoming the new Afghanistan. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, Richard Clark actually was warning about Yemen back, and I remember getting briefed by him back in 1999. And in 2000, of course, the USS Cole was blown up by terrorists from Yemen. So Al-Qaeda has had a lot of pressure, John, put on it in Afghanistan and Pakistan, and therefore there's been a migration of some of its leadership and center of religious and political gravity to Yemen, where there's a failed nation country, so there's no central authority being able to be projected and rein in the terrorists. So that's why the United States, together with the Yemenis military, but it's really the U.S. that has done many of these strikes in the last few months.
And how, Rabasa, do you agree that Yemen is a failed state, or is it on its way to becoming a failed state? And what are the internal pressures there that are making this a haven for al-Qaeda fighters?
I do not believe that Yemen is a failed state. It's a state that's facing some very, very difficult challenges. In some ways, there are resemblances between Yemen and the tribal areas of Pakistan. These are tribal societies. There are areas where the government doesn't exert jurisdiction. You have to keep in mind that Yemen is larger than Iraq and has a much more difficult geography. There are parts of Yemen where there are no roads, no infrastructure. These areas become sanctuaries, or can become sanctuaries for terrorists very easily. And in this case, there is an additional element in that Yemen is very close to the Horn of Africa, where there is a very large al-Qaeda-linked insurgency going on. These two regions are very closely connected, and this is what makes the the whole area so dangerous for the stability of the world.
Right.
Because
Steve Emerson, it's been said that where the road ends, Al-Qaeda begins, and as Anhel was just saying, there's not a lot of roads in a big part of Yemen. So in terms of trying to dislodge these groups, in terms of trying to go after them, as General David Petraeus has indicated the U.S. is, and as Senator Joe Lieberman suggested the U.S. is with Special Operations Forces and Green Berets, how difficult is it to get to them? We know the difficulties that the U.S. has had in Afghanistan in those mountainous regions.
Well, you know, U.S. successes in Afghanistan, although accompanied by signal intelligence, the successes have largely been attributable to boots on the ground, sources, infiltration, special operations, which is exactly the messy type of thing that the United States is going to have to do in Yemen if it's going to basically defeat and put Al-Qaeda on the defensive. There's no other way around it. When Joe Lieberman was talking about special operations, he's talking about covert operations. He's talking about special forces on the ground that are basically going to have to dislodge, conduct covert operations militarily, collect intelligence, recruit informants, basically replicate the entire apparatus of what we did in Pakistan and the South Waziristan.
Is it possible, Anhel, to turn back the tide there? If you say that Yemen is not yet a failed state, is it possible, with the assistance of U.S. forces, to stop it from tipping over into a failed state?
I think it can be done. And I think, in fact, that the job of counterinsurgency is always better done by local forces, because local forces have the local knowledge. They are more accepted by the population. I think it would be a grave mistake to have boots on the ground in Yemen. It would simply validate Al-Qaeda's narrative that the Muslim world is being occupied by infidels. What needs to be done is to give the Yemenis the capabilities that they need, the assistance, the training, the equipment to do the job themselves.
Well, what do you think about that, Steve? Because we have heard from Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula that the attack on Flight 253 was in retaliation for U.S. attacks, or perhaps U.S.-sponsored attacks against Al-Qaeda in Yemen. If the U.S. goes in there, tries to dislodge Al-Qaeda, if it steps up operations, do we risk seeing more of these acts of terrorism directed at the United States, and that it would be better for Yemeni forces to do it? But also that raises the point, are they equipped to do it?
Well, ideally I agree with Angela that it would be better for Yemeni forces to do it. But so far, if you look at the past decade, they've been unwilling to do it, or incapable of doing it. And there's a reason for that. Either they themselves are jihadists, or they don't have enough of the government resources behind them. And I would love to strengthen and embolden the central government to be able to take that decisive force and basically move into the counterterrorism arena and basically obviate the United States from having to do it. But so far, they haven't manifested the political will to be able to do that. So it really leaves it upon the U.S. to do it by itself. I would love to, as I say, see the Yemenis do it, but if they can't do it, we're going to have to do the heavy lifting.
Obviously, there's going to be a lot of focus on Yemen coming up in the future. Steve Emerson, Anhel Rabassa, good to talk to you tonight. Thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Appreciate it.